So, as we've said before, we've got new people in. And of course, when you get new people into new ministerial posts, etc., you hope that at least they will bring, some form of change to the office. And today we're going to be talking about Jonathan Reynolds because he has put a piece out very recently talking about how it's going to be really good for the UK to join the Comprehensive Trade and Pacific Partnership, or the or we'll just call it the Pacific Partnership for short, because I can't be bothered to pronounce the full thing, and I can't be continually to be calling it the CPTPP all the time, even though I know that's one too many P's, but there you go. So we'll just call it the Pacific Partnership because it's just easier to call it that. Yeah, this is so dumb. I cannot believe he is continuing to push this idea that joining this is a good idea for the UK. It's really not. We know it's not. We know economically, short term doesn't provide the UK any benefits. Medium term doesn't provide the UK any benefits. Long term, boost to the UK GDP by 0.01. No, it's like 0.08%, I think, something like that. Yeah, we know this is bad. And it's so bizarre because we know even Labour was criticizing it just a little bit over a year ago, having a go at Kimmy Badenoch. They're trying to praise it as this amazing thing to join. And yet now, of course, we've got a new, he's in power. Obviously, Jonathan is, well, I say Jonathan, but obviously, Reynolds is obviously going to be in charge of technically most of the Brexit stuff as well, because that's where the Brexit department got folded back into as well. Yeah, this is going to be dumb. This is going to be really dumb, and it's really sad to see him repeating some of the same lies about the Pacific Partnership and the benefits of the Pacific Partnership that we've been talking about for years, and why they are bad, why it doesn't exist. And yeah, it's a bit upsetting, to be honest, if I'm not going to lie, but there you go. So before we do get into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off station called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's jump in to what he had to say here. So this government was elected on a pledge to turn the page, to kickstart growth and rebuild our country so that once again, it now serves the interests of the working people. We said that we would hit the ground running from day one, and that's exactly what we've done. And they have, bear in mind, during the summer, even though we haven't heard too much stuff, because technically, if you think about it, even though, obviously they won the election, Parliament's only been in session for 3 weeks. That is not a long time. Like if you consider the time that they've been in power for, and how long Parliament's been open before getting into the summer recess, they've only been in for 3 weeks. Parliament reopens September, so you're talking 2 more weeks. But we know during this time, all the ministers have been going over all their bills and stuff that they want to do. So honestly, in the next couple of weeks, we are going to see a flurry of activity. And of course, we've talked about the the Safety Practices and Meteorological Bill, which in there specifically says that we are going to follow EU rules and regulations. And we'll get back onto what the Pacific Partnership and some of the people in the Pacific Partnership might have to say about that in a moment as well. But it's not like there are some downsides that even Labour have talked about in the past about joining this thing. So you can see, of course, in our pressing ahead with the ascension of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP for short. I would just call it the Pacific Partnership for short. You really want to cut it down even more. It's an expansive free trade agreement covering 4 continents and more than 500 million people, except, again, keys in the name, Pacific Partnership. We are not in the Pacific. We are the only country not in the Pacific that's in this deal. This benefits only those countries that regularly trade together. Those countries do a lot of trade together. We don't. Even if we do have this, it's not going to increase trade. Everyone knows it. We are too far away to really actually benefit from joining this bloc. So he continues, Peru is, of course, expected to shortly become the sixth and final ratification needed to trigger our ascension to the Pacific Partnership by the end of this year. It will mark a major milestone in our journey to the full membership of the bloc, which will now boost our combined, which will then boast a combined GDP of over 12 trillion after the UK joins. And again, I'm really disappointed that Reynolds is chirping on about that. Doesn't matter what the combined GDP is of the Pacific Partnership, because if that's the case, I'm pretty sure that the combined GDP of the EU is worth significantly more. In that case, why aren't we then rejoining the single market and customs union and rejoining the EU? Just a thought there, but there you go. Anyway, this is a real win for the big hitting British exporters who stand to benefit from smoother trade, and more than 99% of UK goods will qualify for over 0% tariffs across the bloc, which includes economies such as Peru, Japan, Mexico, Malaysia, and Singapore. Again, spot the odd one out there. The odd one out there, if you didn't know, is Japan. Japan is only what we would classify as the advanced economy. We are ourselves an advanced economy. In fact, we are almost entirely 80% of the UK business infrastructure and selling and buying, etc., is done through services. This is not manufacturing. The only country there that buys services en masse, of course, is Japan. Are people in Peru going to buy our products? Are people in Mexico, Malaysia, maybe in Singapore, but Singapore's a bit weird. It's also slightly the odd one out as well in that list. But they aren't going to buy our products. When you look at GDP, how much people earn in those countries, the prices of our products, when you look at what we would be selling to those countries, yeah. We've been through these arguments, I don't know how many times about this, but it's really depressing to see this whole thing about tariffs. Tariffs historically now are at an all-time low. So going to zero tariffs isn't that too much of a win in many aspects, but the big thing here is rules and regulations. If you meet rules and regulations, that is easily the far bigger barrier that you see in today's international sort of trade world. This is what a lot of trade deals are doing, even now in and around the world. Going along and thinking what you can do about those standards, etc. Are we going to end up buying, for example, palm oil from Malaysia? We know that has a massive effect on deforestation. Are we going to sort of continue buying that? The EU is certainly going to have a problem with us buying that, because then, of course, come in rules of origin checks. You can't then sell a product made from that palm oil if it's come from Malaysia into the EU. Of course, where's our biggest market still today is not the Pacific Partnership. It's never suddenly going to become these Pacific Partnership countries. It is and always going to be the EU, because guess what? Trade gravity. Countries trade with their closest partners first before anyone else. Who is that? The EU. The EU is on our doorstep. They should be really our first port of call when we are trying to sort of look at stuff and who we should be really aligning ourselves with. That's why, again, I do have, even though I am really disappointed in what our new business and trade secretary, should we say, is written here, I am sort of kind of hopeful about the fact that in that, again, product safety and meteorology bill, I know it's not the most sexiest name ever, but in that bill, we do know it specifically says to follow the European rules when it comes to standards and regulations. However, being in the Pacific Partnership does now open us up to the whole secret court stuff, where if a country doesn't like the fact that we have higher regulations, well, then they can take us to these courts. This, once again, Labour should know. Reynolds should know this, because guess what? Labour brought this up in a question to Kimmy Badnock. oh, yeah, they clearly, even though, clearly they have left the brainworms somewhere in the office, and they've clearly infected our new business trade secretary, but hopefully not too much. Hopefully we can do something about that in the near future. So our ascension now boosts a boost that smaller businesses are now keen to break into these markets, and for the first time too. That really matters because research published by the UK Export Finance in 2019 shows that businesses who export grow at least twice the faster rate than those who don't. Again, that is true. Businesses do export, do grow faster. That is true. But who are they trading with? Who are they trading with? Smaller businesses, guess what? Cost more to export. Just because you have zero tariffs doesn't mean you have to pay to get your goods from A to B. We've talked about this many times before. There is a cost in logistics. Getting your goods halfway around the world, which is effectively where they're going to have to go, ain't going to be that too effective. Because almost immediately you are having to try and cover that cost for sending your products there, for exporting your products to that country. Doesn't even matter about what if the tariffs are 0% at that point, you're still going to cover that logistical cost. And that means you're going to then pass that cost onto these consumers, meaning that UK products being sent to these countries are going to be worth, be selling for a higher price. And then people going to buy that. Is it going to become harder to then break into these markets? Absolutely, it's going to become harder. Remember, breaking into a market is incredibly hard. Trying to reach 1% is seen as the gold standard. And maybe even reaching like 0.5% is seen as an incredibly good breakthrough attempt into a new market. I cannot stress like that, but there you go. So he continues, I also want to try and maintain this momentum, capitalizing now on the goodwill and trust that we've worked so hard to secure the good in the run up to this election. This means hitting the reset button with our trade relations and starting with the European Union. The EU is not just our closest trading partner, it's still our largest trading partner by quite some margin. Then why aren't we putting really our focus on the EU? Why are we bothering joining the Pacific Partnership? Later, he's going to talk about joining the Gulf Cooperation Council, also trying to do one with India, which again, we know is not going to happen. Part of me thinks that the reason is that these are legacy things. Maybe that they are so far along in the process, you can't stop it. And maybe even stopping this time would cause like a big diplomatic hit. So maybe that's why you notice there's a very actually scant information he actually talks about that. There's no real economic information that he's giving. It's not, shall we say, if you can go back a couple of months ago and look at a very similar article that we actually went over at the time of Kimmy Badnock extolling the virtues of joining this. She was all about this and this economic data. You notice none of that is here because Kimmy Badnock got called out for saying all that export data, which we know turned out at that time not to be then true because she inflated the numbers. So it's so bizarre that they are still pushing this when even he's just admitted here, largest trading partner by quite some margin. Why then are we not putting focus on the EU? Anyway, yet we know that thousands of British businesses have now stopped exporting to Europe altogether, and it is no secret as to why. You notice it doesn't actually say Brexit. Still, bizarrely, he does not bring up Brexit with this. The last government's adversarial approach to working with the EU resulted in UK firms being buried now in bureaucracy. And that is true. I've said before, Sunak seemed to turn a corner when it comes to that. He at least defrosted the, in the pun, you see what I did there. He defrosted the relationship, but it did not thaw completely. And we have seen a fundamental change in how our government is approaching relations with the EU. That has been a fundamental different change, but it still does not want to get into this. And I still think they are so worried that if they did anything Brexit related or seem to be undoing Brexit, I seem to think that they are worried that they would like be some sort of mass rebellion, etc. And I've talked about this before, giving space, encouraging our MPs to have these conversations, to not be scared about talking about Brexit, and backing them up if they do. Send them letters, say, hey, you stood up, even if they're not your MP, send them a letter, say, hey, you stood up and said this. Send one to your own MP saying, so and so in the thing said this, good job on them. You should do the same as well. I've talked about that before. It's what we need to really be doing now as a European movement in that way. So back to this. Be ready for tapes. We are now changing course, trying to work to negotiate with the removal of unnecessary border checks while securing mutual recognition for professional qualifications so that British companies can more easily operate in France, Germany, Italy, and beyond. And that is true. We are seeing that. We are seeing a lot more cooperation. We are even hearing, the tune steadily but surely changing on these things. But that will, take time. I think it's a lot shorter time than people think, given the fact the good response we've seen from some of these governments, even in EU diplomats that we've talked about in the past as well. But it's still so bizarre that you're still trying to push some of these things. Maybe some of these things are just so far along, he can't just pull out of them. Maybe that's the way. Again, I don't know, but this is something that Reynolds should be questioned on. And I think we need to be seeing European movements sending a letter and seeing what he says in response to like the letter challenging him on some of these things that he's saying in this. That's what I would really like to see. So at the same time, we're obviously trying to push for higher quality barrier removing trade deals with partners around the world, including the Gulf Cooperation Council and India. Good luck with that, because our last government sure did not have any deals with that. Even India, you ain't going to get anything from that. The Gulf Cooperation Council, I doubt that alone. A deal with the GCC alone would obviously increase bilateral trade by at least 16%, generating an additional 1.6 billion to our economy in the long run. Again, needs to be cited, I think. Obviously, the Gulf, not too far away. They are sort of a big buyer of services to begin with, so I can see some sort of benefit in doing that with the Gulf Cooperation Council, given again sort of who's part of it. They do buy services from that. India ain't gonna happen. That is very, very wishful thinking, unless India itself fundamentally changes its entire stance on its own sort of international trade and how it views international trade. And there ain't no way that's happening anytime soon. But he continues. So we're trying to open up new markets and going for growth abroad at every opportunity. But we're not just ambitious about, but also just as ambitious about spurring growth at home too. It is now showing our plans to now scrap the regressive business rates, tackle late payments to small businesses, and align key institutions under the National Wealth Fund to unlock investment in new clean green industries on the back of the future. That I actually do like. Very true. Business rates, very, very aggressive in how they are done. Late payments for small businesses, absolute bane for small businesses. Lots of companies, bigger companies, if they have to pay a bill to a small company, will put it off. But if they were to do that, shall we say, to another company, well, around would come the lawyers, the auditors, etc., because they can afford to go through that to get that payment. Not so for small businesses. So I am really good to see that the government is at least tackling that. And of course, align key institutions on the National Wealth Fund. Again, that I can agree with as well, powering those green industries. So while the trade stuff is not bad, at least the domestic stuff he's looking is actually quite good. As the Chancellor made clear last week, there will be no now blank check for public sector unions as we deliver growth across the UK. However, after 14 years of now haphazard, knee-jerk policymaking, I know what businesses are crying out for right now. That is certainty and stability. And that is absolutely true. Absolutely true on that, especially after the past, really since 2016. They now want to see a very clear and credible strategy for UK industry, the one that gives them the confidence to invest and plan for not just the next year, but of course the next decade. And we do know that there is an industrial strategy coming. That will be good to see when that comes out. That's something we've heard being sort of, sharpened and polished over the summer as well, just as many of these upcoming things as well. So I'll be very interested when we actually do get to see that, because it will be the first time we've actually had an industrial strategy for over a decade. Imagine that. Over a decade, we have not had an industrial strategy published by the government. Uh, that will be really good. And once again, really good when it's coming to the domestic stuff. No idea why he's so obsessed with the trade stuff, but there you go. So anyway, let's finish this off then. So this is why the Prime Minister and I do believe that setting out our ambitions for a new industrial strategy, one that is aligned now with our trade strategy and will be international from the start. Again, international, if you're going to be focused on that, you've just said our businesses do the most. We do the most business with the EU. Why are we not focusing on them? Why are you putting so much pressure into doing international deals when we've got, our biggest partner right on our doorstep? Again, massively, I think, fundamental misunderstanding of international trade. But there you go. Maybe we'll say, like I say, this is his sort of first foray into this. Who knows? Maybe so far, Jonathan Reynolds here for this thing that his statement he's put out really has taken, a step forward and then taken a step back in some of these things. We'll also be addressing the nation for our plans to now work with mayors and multinationals, councils, CEOs, trade unions, and involved governments and academies to build now a more resilient economy. Again, good. I would really like to see what they've got to say about that. Also, to have now a modern industrial strategy that transforms the UK into a global magnet for international investment. Again, will be really good to see that when it goes out, because it's, again, the type of stuff that we've been missing for a very long time in this country. It will also be a strategy that will let us create good, well-paid jobs in the places that are now most needed. Again, excellent. We really need to say that, but again, we need to see what they're going to do, how they're going to do that. And of course, the strategy that supports our transition into the clean energy superpower by 2030. Once again, good to see that. The Prime Minister will also host an international investment summit on the 14th of October that will help attract investment to the UK, create good jobs across the country, and will also put more money into people's back pockets, meaning the British taxpayers can now reap the benefits of our economic growth. Again, we'll see what happens when we get that. We'll see what happens. We'll see do businesses come back to the UK with a Labour government, a more sensible government on this. We'll wait and see what happens. When the Prime Minister, of course, stood on the steps down the street last month and said that rebuilding the economy would begin immediately, it has, and business confidence has already jumped to the highest levels for over 8 years. And that, again, true. Business confidence since Labour got in. Woof. Highest level for 8 years. Says a lot. Says a lot for the fact that we now have government in this. And probably for the fact of a lot of the domestic stuff he's been saying here and being addressing. Again, the international trade stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know there on that one. But if we do join, the Pacific Partnership, the EU is going to have a lot to say about that. It's swings and roundabouts. You do one thing, you join that block, well, then the other block will then respond in kind. There are consequences for doing that. Labour should know that. They've talked about this when they were in opposition. They raised questions to Kimmy Badenoch, took the piss out of her for doing some of this, inflating the numbers, etc., etc. They should know this. But we wait to see what happens. Maybe, as I said before, maybe some of these things are just so far along that you can't sort of stop them. maybe that just might be the case. Maybe these things are just so far along, it's just pointless to stop them. If Peru's like the last one to do it, then maybe okay. But hey, leaving the Pacific Partnership, what easier than leaving the EU, because you only have to give 6 months notice. And that's it. That is it. If you want to leave the Pacific Partnership, 6 months notice is all we'd have to give. So, it would not be as difficult as leaving the EU, that's for certain. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.